It's about 2 months that I'm playing with a Regal 65 ED-M2. Yes, it's a spotting scope, a well-made one, not too expensive and compatible with standard 1.25 inches eyepieces. Here my impressions. A spotting scope is a refractor plus a 45 degrees erecting prism in a rugged and lightweight package. Nothing prevents to point it at the sky. However, the 45 degrees prism is not as comfortable as a 90 degrees star diagonal to observe, but it is much better than a straight-through binocular. There is no system to add a finder or a red dot, and you are limited to 1.25 inches eyepieces. I think a spotting scope excels if you need a travel, sturdy, grab-and-go refractor to be used for both nature and sky observations, even if the sky part will get most of the use. Specs: a 65mm Z spotting scope, with internal focusing and a magnesium housing. Sort of mid-quality zoom, 40 degrees 62 degrees, but with a large eye lens and a much better eye relief than the cheap models. Need refocusing when changing magnification. Weight is incorrectly specified, a bit more than 1,600 grains, and not the stated 1,327 grains. For mechanics. The scope has a major mechanical problem. It is back heavy and it cannot be balanced with a short dovetail. The unbalance is severe, and it makes challenging using the scope on whatever mount, unless with a payload that largely exceeds the scope's one. However, the problem can be solved. You need at least a 15 cm long dovetail. Luckily, the dovetail can be fixed to the scope using 2 thumb screws, so it stays firm once fixed. Changing eyepiece is not as easy as in a traditional diagonal. There is a self-centering ring, and, once you have turned it, some force should be used to pull out the eyepiece. I think that's normal, as in that way all the system remains waterproof. Very nice the metal-made case for the eyepiece, which screws directly on the scope's body and fully cover the zoom eyepiece, and whatever smaller eyepiece you put there. The back part can be rotated. Hence, it is possible to mount the scope on a ball head. For eyepieces compatibility. I have tested. 1. The zoom eyepiece, it is obviously compatible. Works best up to 30x, more or less, then the image gets softer. 2. Wide field. A 16mm 68 degrees, almost 24x and 2.85 degrees FOV. It focuses at infinity. This FOV is greater than the maximum FOV provided by the zoom eyepiece. All the field is illuminated. I have tested it using 2 stars with a separation slightly greater than 2.8 degrees. However, there is some vignetting, the edges are not as bright as the center. As I can detect it visually, the vignetting should be equal or greater than 20%. If someone has the same scope and it can test a 20mm 68 degrees or something similar, I would love to see the results. I guess the scope can arrive at least up to 3 degrees, more or less. 3. Max magnification. I have tested a 5.5mm 62 degrees almost 70x. It works as it focuses at infinity and the image is usable. Not so good on low contrast targets like Jupiter, very good on the moon and on bright stars. For optical quality. Very good. Star test using the zoom eyepiece at about 30x is surprisingly good, at least at the low magnifications used. Intra and extra focal images are similar, the diffraction concentric rings can always be seen. The scope is collimated, checked with a Cheshire flashlight test. The scope works at full aperture, 65mm. NB, the 65mm is an f5.9. The 100mm has a more obtuse light cone at f5.4, not sure if that might stop down a little bit the aperture of its bigger cousin. The scope is very sensitive on your eye's position. If it is not perfectly perpendicular, it introduces some CA. If the head is perpendicular, CA is low to almost non-existent. This effect can clearly be seen on Jupiter, for example. If the head is not perpendicular and at 48x with the zoom eyepiece, there is a light violet halo on one side of the planet which disappears when you put the head in the proper position. I have never seen such thing before. On Jupiter you can see Neb and Seb plus the 4 satellites, and the zoom at 30-35x is better than the ES5. 5mm at 70x. There is at the moment a heated discussion on cloudy nights about spotting scopes. I can only confirm my initial impressions. For a dual day and night scope, a good quality spotting scope is, IMHO, a very good choice. The scope performs nicely also for astronomy, and not only for daytime use. I do not agree with people that says a spotting scope cannot be used for astronomy. It is true, a 60 to 72 ed doublet with a 45 degrees erecting prism and a zoom eyepiece can also be used for daytime observations, and of course with a 90 degrees star diagonal it is more comfortable during the night. But 1. I know there exists some very expensive astro quality 90 degrees erecting prism, but I do not know of very good quality 45 degrees erecting prisms which can be used with a telescope. The risk of losing optical quality in daytime is there. 2. A telescope is less robust, heavier and not waterproof. For daytime use those are important weakness.